Peace and blessings. How you doing? It's 9 o'clock. It is time to upgrade your faith. You ever think about how you are attracted to the things that you're attracted to? I mean, like anything. Why do people like sunny days? Or maybe you like rainy days. But whatever it is that you're attracted to, what goes beyond that? What is intertwined in what makes you tick? It's a very interesting question. Today, there's all these psychological studies going on about this attractiveness. What makes you emotionally or otherwise attracted to someone or something? This is highly interesting. Some people might say it's the 30-second moment for you to be able to feel attracted to somebody else. And this is something that we really need to realize is a part of the equation. So some people call it love at first sight. Is this what we're talking about? Is there love at first sight? Well, there is an attractiveness, but sometimes people think that it's just a physical attraction. Now, don't get me wrong. There is something such as a physical attraction, but there's also an emotional attraction. There's also a spiritual attraction, and these things are part of what make us tick. In fact, some of the psychological research is saying that these one-night stands or these temporary relationships are based more so on the physical, whereas the lifelong, lasting relationships are based on more of the emotional attractiveness. One of the things that they're saying about attractiveness is that it's unattractive to be boring. So here's the thing. I have great news. Nobody is boring. I think sometimes we're afraid of not being received, not being accepted, and this might hold us back, but nobody is ever boring. This whole attractiveness question has to be couched also with a question of desire, of temptation. Is desire something bad? Hold on a second. Remember, Saint Therese of Lisieux spoke about her desire and how great her desire was to love and to serve God. And she said, there must be a great God who gave me such a desire, because he would not give me a desire as such to love him if he did not want me to complete it. Whoa. Right there, you have Saint Therese of Lisieux speaking about her desire as a way to fall in love again with God. A lot of times we kind of crush our desires, or we crush our emotions, or we say, I'm attracted to this, it must be crushed. Now, this is very important to know, because sometimes an attraction in and of itself doesn't think about sin. An attraction in and of itself is what we call morally neutral. What does that mean? It means that it's neither good nor bad. It's what you do with it. All right, so for example, say that somebody had an attraction to hurt somebody. Yeah, they had an attraction to go put their fist into somebody's face. Okay, well, we have a problem here, right? Because that attraction might be real, that desire might be real, but you don't go around punching people in the face, at least you better not be. So there's some things that lead us to sin. Our attractions need to be channeled in a good and holy way. And for that, we need the enlightenment, the elucidation of the gospel to help us. So our emotions are part of the story. I think a problem that a lot of people have is that they crush what they're feeling because they feel that what they're feeling, they shouldn't be feeling. Now, if you're feeling something, here's something very important to remember. Acknowledge it. You see, your emotions in and of themselves are morally neutral. So if you feel anger, that should be telling you that something's not right. Our emotions are kind of like instruments on a dashboard. If you're driving the car and then you see the gas gauge go all the way to empty, well, that's telling you something. And if you're on the side of the road and you don't know why your car's not working, then you weren't paying attention to your emotions. This is something also that's extremely important. So, in the spiritual life, it's important to know the difference between attraction, desire, and temptation. Ooh, temptation. Are you worried because you're feeling temptation? Get over it. Join the human race. Everybody goes through temptation. Temptation is actually not something that we should be afraid of, but oftentimes, get this, it's a sign of growth in the spiritual life. Did you know that? Yeah. So, listen to me very carefully. If you are going through temptation and you persevere, you're not going bad, you're actually growing in holiness. Meaning, what I'm saying is that if I'm praying and I feel all these temptations to be distracted and I struggle through my prayer, well, my prayer is much more efficacious, much more meritorious, has a lot more weight to it than if everything was easy and I felt like I was floating around in the clouds. If you're doing something and you're persevering through the struggle, good on you. This is building up your spiritual stamina. Like it says in the first chapter of the book of St. James, do not be troubled when you come across all types of trial, because this trial leads to endurance, and we need this endurance. Something very important to remember is what St. Gregory the Great said were 3 types of temptation. So there's a temptation that is a suggestion, there's a temptation that you begin to delight in, and then there's the temptation that you consent to. Suggestion, delight, and then consent. Okay, so the first stage of temptation is suggestion. You hear that little voice that says, you see that apple pie? Why don't you eat all of it? And you think, I guess I could eat all of this apple pie, but no, it's not. It's going to make me feel sick. Furthermore, what about everybody else? And you know what? I think that's actually a sin of gluttony. No, I'm not. I'm just going to have a little bit. Thank you. Right there, if you persevere through that temptation, you are growing in holiness. If you are tempted, and by suggestion, it is not a sin. Very important to remember. If you're going through that stage, it's not a sin. But if you begin to delight in it, like you hear the suggestion, have all of that apple pie, and you're looking at that apple pie, and you're like, oh yeah, it would taste delicious. No. Hold on a second. No, I can't do that. If you began to delight in that sin, well, that's something that you might want to just bring to confession. You just say, Father, bless me for I've sinned. There's all these temptations that I was like delighting in. I didn't do it, but I was delighting in them. And then there's the consent. So if you hear the voice, eat the apple pie, you begin to delight in the apple pie, and in your mind, you just say yes to eating all of that apple pie, but then you don't. This is something you should confess as well. Why? Where do I get this from? From Jesus. When he said, if you look at a woman lustfully, then you have committed adultery with her. So Jesus is saying that if you consent in your mind, if you look and you desire this woman in a sinful way, your attractiveness is now leading you into sin, and this temptation, you're just letting it all happen right up here. This is something you need to confess. Think about it. Where does sin begin? Sin begins in the thought. It's not just about doing or not doing things. Actually, that's kind of like what the Pharisees said. So Jesus is proving right here that he is definitely not Pharisaical, but he definitely wants the transformation of the entire human person. So what I'm saying is that it's all right here. I remember my football coach telling me that. It's all right here. The battle begins here, but the victory is here as well. It's important to recognize that sometimes we have attractions and desires, and just to recognize it. We're attracted to good things. We're attracted to people who appreciate us. We're attracted to things that taste good. We're attracted to good and holy things. It's important to recognize that your attraction is given to you by God, but meant to be honed and harnessed by you. Discipline in living out your life is something extremely important. If you are not trying to channel that which you feel, if you don't have what we call self-mastery, then how are you going to be able to give life to others? How are you going to be able to be a married man, a married woman? If you're just ruled by your desires, then it becomes a dictatorship within you, and your emotions hold the key to everything. It indeed becomes a slavery. Now, it's important to recognize your emotions are important. Don't crush what you feel, recognize it, and then say, what does this have to do with reality? Sometimes we can get really caught up in our emotions. And, it happens. Take a deep breath. Remember you're a child of God, and take the step that the Lord is asking you to take. I remember after an event, this one wonderful young woman, I ended up doing her wedding afterwards. She came to me and she complained about everything. I can't believe this is how you treated me. You didn't even talk to me. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. And then somebody did this and somebody did that. And I'm listening to her and I'm taking it in. Let me tell you something. Priests hear a lot of people complaining. I'm just saying. And I'm just listening to her and I say to her, I hear everything that you're saying. And on my part, I do apologize if you felt in some way offended or hurt by the way things turned out at this event. But can I ask you a question? What does what you're saying have to do with the cross? I asked her. You are complaining and saying these things, and I hear you. But you have not mentioned the cross of Jesus Christ once. In our struggle within ourselves, do we forget the cross? Do we forget the Lord and what He is trying to do? And if we do, then we find ourselves on a lonely island with only our emotions to contemplate. That's not what the Lord has intended for you. Indeed, what the Lord is asking of you is something much more. We have a lot of stories in the Bible when there was an attraction and then a bad step. Ooh, Samson and Delilah. If you're reading the book of Judges and you're reading the story of Samson, an incredible warrior, you're like, how many hints does this guy need to know that this girl is trouble, all right? But that's how we are in so many of our relationships. We know it's bad, but we stay there because we like it. But the Lord is trying to speak to us and say, you don't have to live this way. My brothers and my sisters, if you are living this way in something that is toxic, I tell you, in the name of Jesus Christ, call down the Holy Spirit to transform your lives. And you can do this in this very moment. Samson was with Delilah, and little by little, the things got more and more escalated. We remember how Samson said the source of his strength was his hair, and when they cut it off, he was powerless. But indeed, his hair signified something more. His hair signified his commitment to God. And when they cut his hair, he had already cut off his commitment to God. And now, when he was blinded, a slave of the Philistines, his commitment to God began to grow back again, and his hair began to grow as well. Now, maybe some of you can really relate to the story of Samson. I can't actually, because my hair doesn't really grow that much. But anyway, maybe some people really do struggle with feeling that their relationship and their connection with God are kind of going against each other. Again, remember, those who are married in the church, God is giving you grace. But if you're not married, maybe this is a sign that this relationship is not God's will for you. And I say that so that you can be free to love the Lord with your whole mind, your heart, and your strength. Here we find three forms of temptation. St. Gregory the Great gave us the types of temptation, but this is now three categories of temptation. There's the sins of the temptation of the body, temptations of the spirit, and temptations of the soul. We see this in 2 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. I invite you to read that on your own. But we see this lived in the temptations that Jesus went through in the desert. So first, the devil waited for Jesus to be hungry, fasting for 40 days and for 40 nights. Anybody would be hungry. And that's the moment that the enemy comes in and says, hey, see that rock right there? Hey, man, I know you're hungry, man. Why don't you just turn that into a piece of bread? And this is how the subtle temptation begins, with half-truths. And we see that our hunger is good, and I guess there's nothing wrong with eating bread, right? So yeah, let me turn that in. But this is how the enemy slowly pulls us in. We say things like, well, I have needs, or, well, if it's a sin, it's a little sin. Oh, it's just a white lie. Oh, well, I'll just go to confession. And little by little, we begin to be pulled in. St. Teresa of Avila says that the thing that is most destructive to souls desiring perfection, meaning desiring holiness, is venial sin done on purpose. Meaning, like, it's a venial sin, it's a little sin, but you just don't care. Whatever. The devil starts by tempting us with the flesh. Desires for sex, desires for comfort, desires for entertainment. These are the avenues so many times where danger comes in. Then the temptation is to be worshipped. These temptations of the spirit. Many times we fall into wanting our own spiritual needs filled, devoid from God. And the third one is the temptation of the soul, where the devil revealed his plan and said, "Bow down and worship me," the enemy said. And Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your whole heart, mind, and soul, and him alone. You shall not have other gods before him." These types of temptation need to be recognized so that we can separate what is not of God with a good and wholesome attraction, a desire that indeed will lead us to God. In this psychology of attractiveness or attraction, we need to remember that there's a couple of things that are incredibly important. You are a son or daughter of God. God desires you, and he is calling you unto himself. And the desire and attraction in your heart and in your soul is something that he wants you to form. to allow to be purified, so that you will desire indeed what he does. A very holy person once told me, I know how to get everything I want, and that is to desire everything God wants. It's 9 o'clock, time to upgrade your faith. I'm Father Agustino. Peace.
Someone who's used media a lot in evangelization, so I believe in the importance of Catholic radio, Catholic TV, Catholics using the new media. Can I encourage everyone to watch Shalom TV? I think it's a great vehicle of evangelization. And God bless all of you.
Shalom World, God's own channel.